Hi, and welcome along to another pulmonary fibrosis and lung transplant chat. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jim Uhrig. Welcome, Jim.
Good morning. How are you, Eamon?
I'm very good, thank you. So I know you've quite a remarkable story to tell. Maybe take us back. So you were diagnosed some time back with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And then led up to 2009 when you had a lung transplant. Tell us about that journey that you had.
Well, I started in 2008 with what I thought was a bad cold, but really I felt like I was had the flu for a couple of years, and so I finally had my primary care doctor suggest I go see a pulmonologist after a really bad cold session. And it turned out he diagnosed it properly as pulmonary fibrosis. That pulmonologist suggested that I come back. That was in May of 2008. And that pulmonologist suggested that I come back at the end of the summer. Fortunately, I had a very good friend who's a good Irishman, John Sullivan. We call him Sully. Who had not only one lung transplant, he had two. So when I told him what I had and what the pulmonologist told me, he said, "You need to get to the Simmons Center, which is one of the centers of excellence at UPMC." And fortunately, I live in Pittsburgh, and it was an easy journey for me to connect with those people. And through Dr. Kathy Lindell, the clinical nurse specialist at the time in that center, she hooked me up with an appointment with Dr. Kevin Gibson, who, in my opinion, is one of the most knowledgeable pulmonologists. Both of those two are two of the most knowledgeable pulmonology people around. And they were my doctors, and they were my counsel. If I had waited till the end of the summer, I don't know what would have happened, because I was on oxygen from Dr. Gibson in July of that summer. And I continued to increase my oxygen level while continuing to work. I worked right up to the day of my call for my transplant. Even though the last month I spent pretty much at home, I had plenty of oxygen. Obviously, you need to have lots of oxygen, and I had good coaching from Dr. Lindell and Dr. Gibson on that subject, and was able to do that. And I was in sales and marketing, so I was able to really focus on other things other than being sick, and just making sure I had plenty of oxygen. So it was pretty good. I got a call. In the end of March of 2009, indicating that I was approved for a transplant, and that about a week before I got the call for the actual transplant, I was notified that I was like number one on the list based on the LAS score. And my LAS score at that time was not particularly high, but it was high enough to be number one in the region. Fortunately, I got my lungs that I needed from my wonderful donor, and the relationship I have with the donor family is quite remarkable. But that's what saved my life, and also just having the wherewithal to have all these great partners help me really pay attention to the detail. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've done well as a recipient. I pay attention to details, and particularly the doctors, and what they ask me to do, I do. And I have some wonderful follow-up medical personnel now that also it's here at UPMC, which again, I live right here. So it's 30 minutes from my house and from my business. I'm talking to you from my business. Behind me is all these wall samples. They're elements.
It's like you're in the picture frame business.
Yeah, I'm in the custom picture frame business, and I frame all kinds of things. Here's one that is a frame that I made that is pretty hard to see, but the elements of this is a newspaper article about my donor and the
Wow.
relationship I have with him. And
So
so I do all kinds of.
tell us a little bit more about that, because I know you've got quite a remarkable story in that you've met your donor's family, and that must have been quite special.
Yeah, it really is, and I honor it. I exchanged letters with my donor family. I got transplanted in April of 2009. Yeah, I was in sales and marketing all my life, so even grew up in a roadside China business along one of the main roads here in Pittsburgh area. So I was selling things from the day one, probably right out of the womb, and so I wrote a letter to my donor family in August of 2009. That was 4 months after my transplant, and that was really the first time I could imagine that I was capable of writing such a letter, because all the new drugs and everything, they slow you down, and physically and mentally. But I wrote the letter, and I sent it off to through the process, and I signed it Jim from Pennsylvania, and without any last name. That's traditionally the way it goes here in the States. I didn't hear anything back for a while. Ironically, it was about a year later that I was visiting the husband of a high school classmate who also got a double lung transplant from pulmonary fibrosis. And how ironic it was that I went down to see that person, and my transplant coordinator told me, I have a letter for you. And so that was the first letter that I got from a guy named Travis in Kansas. And I responded rather promptly, thanking him for the letter. And he told me about his mother. And we went about our ways. And I really didn't hear much more about him from him for a couple of years. He was he's quite a remarkable guy, the journalism background, and very much an athletic runner, and does all kinds of things. So all these pins on my hat, you might wonder what they are. I don't work at one of the local restaurants. I go to the U.S. transplant games, which are every 2 years held here in the States. And in 2012, I wanted to demonstrate how well I was doing, so I ran the 100-meter dash. And wow. The 100-meter dash was quite a challenge for me, but I was a former American football referee. So I liked running. I liked trying to stay in shape. And I was able to run the 100 meters. And when I wrote my last letter to Travis, which was in January of 2013, I told Travis that I ran the 100-meter dash at the 2012 games. And I was also in the process of trying to come up with an idea to write a book. And the book was called Partners for Life. And I keep that book here in my store also all the time, because it comes up in visits. People come to my frame shop all the time, and they think they're coming for something framed, but they leave with a whole different perspective of issues about pulmonary fibrosis or lung issues, and particularly donor families. And so many of them come and they get a book. They just, and I have so many nurses that come here. And the fact that my donor was a nurse, it's even more remarkable because of the medical center we're here in Pittsburgh. There's so many nurses that stop in. But, getting back to the story, I wrote Travis that last letter in January 2013, and didn't hear anything back from him. I told him what I was doing. And then in June of that year on Facebook, I got a post that said, I want to be your friend. I'm Travis from Kansas. And I responded in about 2 seconds. Said, the only Travis I know is the son of my donor from Kansas, and I'd certainly welcome a friendship. And one thing led to another. We met in September of that year. He worked for the U.S. State Department. At that time, he was stationed in Africa. but he was back in for some training, and we met over in Eastern Pennsylvania and had a remarkable visit. We talked about different things, funny things about her life and about my life. And we had a lot of great bonding issues. And he gave me a gift that day. And the gift he gave me was this little purple bracelet, okay, which was hers. And it says complaintfreeworld.org. I never take it off because that was hers, and that's the kind of attitude she had. And what I gave Travis was I gave Travis one of these little crosses that I held throughout my whole time in the hospital. And there's a lot of comic things that happen in hospital beds, particularly when it took me 2 months to get through it initially. And I always say you can get through a transplant situation without faith, but it sure is a lot easier to get through it with faith. And so one thing led to another. We met on numerous other occasions, and stay in touch. I just sent him a long email just the other night. He reminded me 3 weeks ago that he hadn't heard from me for a while, and I must be very busy. And yeah, I have been. That's a good thing. And but he is too. Remarkable. And he basically he and I will get together again, I'm sure, this year sometime. He travels with the National Basketball Association, which he works for in New York City. So he could come to Cleveland, which is real close to Pittsburgh, and we'll get together sometime.
And you mentioned his mom saved 6 lives, and she had always told her family that she was very much in favor of organ donation.
Yeah, she was very passionate about that. She was a nurse, and at 44 she got her master's degree, and so she got her master's degree because she wanted to teach other nurses. And one of the main points that she taught them was the value of organ donation and transplants, how important that was. And certainly, I think nurses are just so wonderful. And I was a horrible patient. my friend Sully will relate many stories about how bad of a patient I was. I'd never been in the hospital before. Never been sick in my life, really, other than a cold here and there. But yeah, I'm lucky to be alive, and my greatest partner, as I say, even though I had so many medical partners, I had so many personal partners, family partners, greatest partner is my donor. And the fact that she is a nurse really is sunk in with me. And I try to take profits from my book and also from things I do. People come into the frame shop all the time with a repair job. I say, oh, you need a transplant, do you? And so that starts a nice dialogue. And then I'll take the money from that little transplanted frame and also any profits I get from the book and other things. I do some work with a bunch of different doctors here in the States on pulmonary fibrosis, but overall executive steering committee process and things like that. With a lot of really smart people, and I always feel like I am far from the smartest one in that room. There are a lot of great people working on a lot of great issues, and so I feel like where I can do the most good is I try to help the continuing education of nurses in the transplant cardiothoracic transplant group at UPMC, and it's very rewarding.
It's great that you're giving back. So I really admire that.
Well, particularly because of my donor's passion for nursing, and Purple's passion. That's what her bracelet is, and I have a lot of things around here that have purple on it, and so I'm very blessed to have that relationship with my donor family, and I thank Travis for that. I think his mother would certainly approve of what we have. And she came from a large family, and a lot of them are Facebook friends of mine. So if you look at my Facebook page, you'll see almost so much stuff is on organ donation and pulmonary fibrosis issues. And I'm always fearful of the issues on pulmonary fibrosis being genetic, because my mother died of emphysema, and she went rather quickly. And when I was initially diagnosed in 2009, they didn't really think there was any link there, but now they know there's some links there. Yeah. So I've got 4 sons, 4 grandsons. That's really important to me, and that keeps me going too. And so I'm 9.5 years out.
There's a possibility your mother was misdiagnosed, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because her symptoms were just like mine, and she went really quick. You know, me, 9 months after, well, 11 months after I was diagnosed officially, I was transplanted. My surgeon said I only had 6 to 8 weeks to go. My lungs were hard as brick. And it's just remarkable that everything came together. I'm certainly blessed in a lot of ways.
Back to something you said right early on in our discussion, Kathy Lindell, who's we've tremendous time for as well. She always advocates that you have the conversation around lung transplant as early as possible, because one of the unpredictable things about pulmonary fibrosis, some people can stay steady for long times, but some people unfortunately can decline very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's for sure. And what helped me is my friend Sully, who had all that experience with transplants. And when Dr. Gibson told me all the options and all the issues involved, he told me lung transplantation. It was in the first visit. And I said, well, my buddy Sully had 2 of them. Must not be that hard. Little did I know. But it was certainly worth the journey. And I encouraged it for everybody that has this disease to seriously consider it. And I was lucky at the time. My health and other issues, my weight and everything, probably wouldn't permit me to get a transplant today, because at that time I weighed 235. Now I weigh 175, which is about what I weighed when I graduated from college. Mm-hmm. And the other issues that creep in after being on the immune suppressant drugs all the time is now I have chronic kidney disease. My kidneys are operating in the mid-30 range. If they get down to 20, I'd be looking at a transplant of a kidney. And that's a possibility, but as I say, people sometimes act woeful when they're told what their diagnosis is. I always felt, and it's true with pulmonary fibrosis and certainly true with chronic kidney disease, I'm just happy to know what I got and trying to address it positively. And I think that's one of the things that Kathy and the other people at Simmons Center have really done an excellent job on. But some patients are just too woeful. Or they perhaps had known connections in their family already to this disease, and they know how terrible it can get. But I kept the faith, and I believed in my partners, and I had great partners. I just so fortunate.
Yeah. And that's something we're very active in we're working with a lot of researchers, helping to uncover more of the understanding about pulmonary fibrosis. And one area we're also very active in that I saw on a recent blog post from you is around air quality research. And I know from your trip to the recent transplant games in Salt Lake City, you had a lot of problems with the air quality there.
Yeah, I think it's more of the altitude. The altitude was the first thing you have to get adjusted to. But that's true with any individual, like from this area here, 1,000 feet elevation to out there 4,000 feet. Yeah, it really makes a difference, and you have to take a few days to get acclimated. But what was the problem with Salt Lake City is all the Western fires we had. Salt Lake City's in a bowl, and there was a lot of smoke in that bowl. So that really, that impacted me. Some of the lung patients that were there didn't seem to have a problem. But in my case, there were some issues. At least I blamed it on that because my golf was terrible.
Well, you need to have something to blame that golf shot on.
I hope to play better next summer because I'm entertaining the thought of coming to the World Games, which will be my first trip to the World Games, which are being held in Newcastle, wow. Newcastle, UK. And if I do, I'll certainly make a side trip to Ireland. I've been there once before. I would love to be back.
Well, we'd love to see you here. Thank you very much for your time today, Jim. You have an inspiring story. And I really admire you for continuing to give back with education and raising awareness of both pulmonary fibrosis, organ donation, and lung transplant.
Well, thank you for that. I have my own business. This is my frame shop that I work in every day, and I put in long hours, and I get up every day. Some days I'm rather tired, like I'm 73 today. I have reason to be tired.
Looking well for a happy birthday.
Well, thank you very much. But it gives me something to come in every day for, and I have a room full of jobs to work on every day I'm here, and so that's really. And then people come in. It's just a wonderful opportunity to spread the awareness, like you said. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to any other questions or continuing dialogue. Have a great day.
Look forward to it, Jim. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.